Hi, and welcome to Hometime. I'm Dean Johnson.
And I'm Susanne Egli. In this video, we're going to build a couple of retaining walls out of these interlocking concrete blocks.
We'll be building a small wall out here in front. Actually, it's nothing more than a raised tree ring.
And then we're going to change blocks and build a 3-level terrace on the side of a house across the street.
And finally, we'll be building a more aggressive terracing project out and back. By the time you see these 3 projects, you should have a pretty good idea of how to put up your own retaining wall. Okay, so that's the edge right there. Right.
Hometime is made possible by Chevy full-size pickup, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickup on the road. At Hometime, we believe the best way to get the job done is to use the finest tools.
And the Chevy Silverado is one of our favorites. Equipped with an optional Vortex 6000 V8 engine, it generates 300 horsepower and 355 foot-pounds of torque to power you through the toughest jobs.
And with an available 4th door, you've got lots of room for all your other tools.
And friends to help you use them.
At home or on the job site.
For work or play.
It's no wonder we at Hometime count on Silverado, the truck, to get the job done.
Silverado from Chevy, the most dependable, longest-lasting trucks on the road.
Building raised planting beds and retaining walls are great do-it-yourself projects. Now, people that do these lots of times will use wood products, or things like railroad ties or treated landscape timbers.
And nowadays, wood can be treated to resist decay and lasts pretty long even when it's buried in the ground. But you really have to install it properly or you will end up with rot problems.
So, for do-it-yourselfers, we think a concrete product is a real good idea. Now, there are a couple of brands of interlocking concrete blocks like this on the market, and they work under the same basic principles.
Probably the most important principle is to prepare the base for the wall properly. Now, on a project like this one, where we're only going a couple of rows high with a wall, it's not that big a deal.
Well, the main thing we have to worry about is not disturbing the soil that we'll be leaving in place. And we do this by what we call skimming. And I'm starting out here by cutting an edge around the outside of our planting bed.
The proper technique for skimming out dirt to create the base for a block retaining wall is to run the shovel almost horizontally. Now, you're scraping up the soil you want to remove, but you're not digging up the soil underneath. Now, you should use a shovel with a square nose. Dean likes the one with a long handle so he can stand up straight and kick it with his foot. For me, it's a little easier to use a shorter spade. How you doing there?
Well, I'd say it's worth checking.
Okay. Now, as we dig down here, we want to check 2 things. First, we want to make sure that the block is buried about halfway down. And that would be about 2 inches down. Okay, it looks like we've got it about where we want it here in the front.
Our lawn here has a pretty good uphill slope. We figure about 15 inches from the front of the tree ring to the back. So what this means for us is the first row will only go to a point until it starts to die into the uphill grade.
Just keep working around until we've dug 4 inches. That's the depth of a block. Oh, we've got a little high spot over here.
Okay, I'll take some of that out.
As we've been digging around, we've also been checking to make sure our base is level.
Okay, give that a try.
Looks good.
All right.
Okay, we'll put that first block in. Oh boy, what are we going to do about our flange back here?
Oh, I'll tell you, that ground is so hard.
It
How
really
about if I
is.
start busting off some flanges?
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, the blocks have a flange on the back here. This is what keeps each row locked into the row underneath. For the first row, you can knock the flange off if you want, or you can just force it down into the dirt a little, and that'll help hold it in place. The ground is so hard here, that just isn't going to work.
To take off this flange, you hit it with a hammer. You can probably use just about any hammer, but we're using a brick chisel. And be sure to wear safety glasses when you're doing this, because chips of block are flying all over the place. Get this one over here. I want to be sure to check the level of the blocks as you put them in position. Let's see, a little low right there.
Okay. Now, if you need to make minor adjustments, you just use a little sand to raise the block. Now, you don't want to use loose dirt, because that will settle a bit over time. Should
Give
be
that a
okay.
try.
Oh, that looks
Yeah, that
good.
looks real good. Grab another one here. Okay, check this one out. It's kind of, yeah, it's way low here in the back.
Okay.
Must have dug that out kind of steep. Didn't even know it. That spot right there?
Yep. Now the first row sets the shape for the whole project, so you want to make sure that you've got it just right. You know, this looks kind of tight in here, but I guess that's the way we need it, isn't it?
I think it looks all right. Let's get this one in here. Now another thing you want to remember about these is you want to make sure that they're sitting right next to each other. The front edges should be touching like they are on our block here.
As you finish each row of a wall like this, you need to backfill in behind the blocks. Now since this wall is so simple, we're going to fill in with a little soil and then we'll tap it down really well.
And to compact it, I'll just use the end of a 4x4.
It's also real important to have the top of each row clean before you put on the next row. So if there's any dirt, you do need to sweep it off.
To get our blocks ready for the second row, we're knocking off flanges on either side. Now the reason we're doing this is because we have a curved wall. If we had a straight wall, it wouldn't be necessary. The flange on the back of the block here would line up and lock the block into just the exact position. But we're working with a curved wall. So what we run into there is the entire flange will hold the block back too far. So by knocking off the two sides of the flange, and flip this over, put it in position, and it's in exactly the right spot.
Once we've knocked that little bit of flange off the edge of the top blocks, they fit down squarely over the bottom row.
Now what we've done here is set up what's called a running bond pattern. That's where the joints between the blocks on the second row line right up on the middle of the blocks on the first row. Okay, there you go. Once we get to a straight section of wall, we don't have to knock the flanges off anymore. We can just keep on going. Now our second row will die back into the hillside a little bit further than the first row. So it's time to do a little bit more skimming.
Now what's important here is that we skim out to the exact same height as the top of the bottom row. Here where the first row ends, there was a little gap where we'd skimmed away for the first row. So we just filled it in with a little dirt, tamped it down really well, and then put a little sand over it to level it out. Okay, now we'll just continue along with our second course here until it finally dies into the hillside too.
Well, because we're building a raised planting bed, we needed a little extra fill. So we picked some up in the truck, load it up here in the wheelbarrow, and we'll just haul it over to our site.
Okay, well, that's the procedure. We just keep going along until we finished all the rows the same way. Cleaned off, I guess I can start putting this up here.
Okay, here's another one for you.
Okay.
Boy, you know,
Let's see.
this stuff is so rock hard.
I
I'll
know.
tell you, just about you pick to get.
Well, this is looking bad too. Okay.
How we adjusted the back curve here to avoid having any partial blocks on the top row. We just flatten out a little bit to avoid this. Now we can go ahead and fill in the area, plant a tree, and add some flowers.
This is a very straightforward retaining wall project. It took us the better part of a long day, but now we'd like to show you one that's a little more complicated. The project we've got going here is one of the most typical retaining wall projects. Now this house is built on a walkout lot, so there's a good-sized hill over on this side of the house.
Well, this is usually pretty much wasted space. It's too steep to plant anything. It's kind of hard to mow around. So we've got a good solution. We'll put in 3 different terraces. It'll create some flat areas where we can plant some flowers and shrubs, And it'll also hide the air conditioner compressor here.
The walls are going to have 9 rows showing a 4-inch block, a total of 3 feet for each wall. And when you start working on walls that high, you need to do a little more preparation. What we've done is dig down about 6 inches below where we want the wall to start, and we put in some fill. Then we compact the fill with a hand tamper. Now this tool does a little larger area than the piece of 4x4 that we used on our first project.
Well, we're filling this area in with sand. We had a truck dump off about 3 yards up in the driveway. We're just bringing it down here with wheelbarrows. Now, check to see how we're doing. Hey, Suzanne, we need a little bit over here in this corner.
Okay.
Yeah, throw that in. I'll tap that down a little bit. You want to check this?
You ready? That looks pretty good. All right, that looks good. Well, we've got the base all prepared. It's level all along, and we've set it low enough so that the first row will pretty much be sunk below the ground level in the front. Now, as a rule of thumb, you want to bury the bottom row about 1 inch for every 8 inches of wall height above the ground. We're pretty close to that with 36 inches above the ground and 4 inches below.
For this wall, we need a little bit larger block. This one weighs about 45 pounds, and instead of a flange, it has these 2 little holes for pins that will interlock with the blocks above it. Ready to go?
All set. The first part of this wall is straight, and it'll curve around and die into the hill.
Okay, here's the second one. All right, now we strung a building line to make sure that we're installing the first 2 blocks here perfectly straight. You want to check them for level?
Needs to put down a little bit on this side.
All right. Now you could lift the block up and dig sand out from underneath, but sometimes it's just easier to beat it with a mallet.
Okay, a tiny bit more on this one.
Okay. Try that.
Okay, that looks good. Looks good. All right, we've laid out the bottom course for the whole wall here, including the part of the wall that dies into the hillside. Now, as we said, these blocks have holes for fiberglass pins to lock them to the row above them. We want to put the pins in now so we don't get any dirt in the hole from the backfill.
Now we're backfilling using river rock, and we're placing the rock behind the blocks and the little areas in between them.
Once the areas are filled up, we scrape off the tops to get ready for the next row. And like our first project, you want to sweep the top of the blocks before you put on the next row.
And the blocks have these little holes on the bottom that fit right over the top of our pins. When you stack the blocks, you pull the top block forward, and everything gets snug together. Now we want our second row to die into the hillside here. So we've scooped out this area, added some fill back in, brought it up to the level of the last block on our first row.
We start setting the blocks for the second row until the natural grade of the hillside starts to bury them.
Okay, that's good there. Now with our running bond pattern, we need half a block up against the house. Now one way of getting this is using a cold chisel and a fist maul. So what we've done here is just scored this all the way around the outside, as you can see. We put it on the edge here, and we break it. You should get a pretty clean break, but you might have to clean it up just a little bit.
From here on out, we follow the same steps for each row.
Once the blocks are in place, we insert the pins. Then we fill around the blocks with gravel.
Clean out the tops of the blocks and put on the next course. We've got 6 courses total, and this will take a couple of hours.
Now, there are a couple of things we should tell you that we've done on the wall here. The top blocks are called cap blocks. They don't have the little holes for the pins sticking out the top. You don't want to see that on your top row.
And remember, the blocks are laid out in a running bond pattern. Now, this means that the joints are not lined up row after row, but they're staggered.
Also, there are some adjustments you have to make when working with curved sections. At the bottom of the wall, we have to leave a space between the blocks. But as we move up the wall, the space narrows. At the top, we might even have to chip out part of the block to get it to fit. Well, that's because the blocks tend to get squeezed together on a curve as they step back.
So far, the wall's taken about a full day.
We'll come back tomorrow, and hopefully we should be able to get the other 2 levels done. I'll get this stuff raked up here. Okay, get this one in here. Now, it's taken us a couple days to get to this point, and we're not going to kid you. This is a lot of work.
Yeah, the block's heavy, the river rock's heavy, the sand's heavy, the dirt's heavy, even the tamper gets heavy after a while. But we did finish it in a weekend, and now we're just putting in a finishing touch.
Okay, that one's all set.
I'm putting some construction adhesive to hold down the top blocks. This is just a little insurance. The fill behind the top row here will push it forward on the fiberglass pins, but there's nothing but the weight of the block holding it down.
The adhesive helps hold it down. It makes it a little bit less likely it'll be knocked out of position. Now again, once we're done with this terracing project, we have a decent-sized landscaping job ahead of us.
But that's another show. Well, now we've done a medium and a small retaining wall project. Now let's turn our attention to a really big one.
Well, I got all the shovels here. All right, well, this is a planting bed for the tree right here. We got the stairway going up there.
Right, and the lower wall ends right here, and
Yeah.
then that block marks where it ends on that side.
Well, the back of the house here has a hill running up from it. We're going to put in a series of terrace walls, kind of dress things up a little bit.
We're going to cut into the hillside just a bit and put in a 4-foot-high wall right along here.
And we have a second wall going in right over here to create another planting bed for trees and shrubs, or vegetables and flowers, pretty much whatever you'd want to do.
So as you're looking out from the back of the house or sitting on the deck, you're looking at a very nice landscape view instead of this muddy, overgrown hill.
Well, the nice thing about this project, it gives us a chance to show you a couple of different design possibilities you can do with this type of construction.
It'll also let us show you a couple of different problems you're going to have with construction.
Now, we'd be lying if we told you this was a do-it-yourself project. We are literally going to be moving tons of block and dirt before we're done here.
So what we've done is hire a contractor to help out with the heaviest work. And he's going to supply us with a bobcat, which is a little bulldozer, and someone who's going to operate it. We've also hired a couple of extra guys to help us out.
One thing you have to consider is, what is the bobcat going to do to your lawn? If you're real careful, you can travel a bobcat over the top of the lawn a couple times without doing any permanent damage. But for our job, we're going to be going back and forth a lot. So our plan was to create a pathway for the bobcat. We cut out the sod here and rolled it up. When the job's all done, we'll roll the sod back into the pathways, and in a couple of months, everything should look just fine again.
With a wall this size, we're getting into some pretty heavy construction, so we're using some pretty heavy blocks.
Yeah, about 100 pounds to be exact. But it isn't just the weight that makes them strong. The units are secured to the rows above them with these interlocking fiberglass pins.
The back part of the block also has a pretty interesting shape, and the flanges here on the tail will help hold it into the hillside. And these open areas, the cores, when these are filled in with crushed stones, it'll make the block even heavier.
And this isn't the only block we're using for the project. We have another 19 pallets out in front, so it makes a lot of sense to have a bobcat bring everything out here and back.
Another problem we've got here is water. And there's at least 2 springs in this hill. And if we ignore this, what will happen is the water will flow down the hill and start eating away at the fill behind the retaining walls, and it'll just be a disaster. The water is probably the most dangerous thing to a retaining wall. So we'll be using a moisture barrier that'll help catch the water before it seeps down into the wall. The membrane has a soft fabric on each side and a plastic webbing in the middle that'll help direct the water away. And to carry the water to the street, we're going to put in something called drain tile. We've dug little trenches in the excavated area, and the first step is to line the bottom of the trenches with the landscape fabric.
Next, we lay the drain tile on top of the fabric. A drain tile isn't really tile. It's a flexible plastic tube with small slits in the side. The slits let water into the tube. The biggest problem with drain tile is keeping the inside of the tube from filling up with mud. So the type of drain tile we're using has a fabric around it to block dirt.
Now we lay the moisture membrane in along the back of the excavated area, with the bottom edge tucked in just behind the drain tile.
To help protect the drain tile from dirt, we shovel river rock over it. And finally, we wrap the rock and drain tile up in the landscape fabric.
Okay. So in theory, the underground water that's coming down the hill will hit this barrier, run down the inside of it, collect in the drain tile, and be carried off to the street.
I'm making the connection between the drain tile that runs behind the retaining wall and this one that's already in the yard. Now, this runs all the way up to the street up front and then drains in to the storm sewer.
After dealing with any potential water problem, the most important thing you want to think about, like on any retaining wall project, is what the wall's going to sit on.
So the next thing is the base. We should be able to get some of that
Oh,
done
yeah.
yet today, don't you think?
Yeah, let's get started.
Shovel some more.
Well, as you can see, we've got about 3 feet of snow in our project from an early snowstorm. That makes the work a little more difficult, but not impossible.
In fact, the retaining wall contractors we know work all winter long. Now what we've done here is remove the snow off the top of the block in an area behind the wall.
And that's because we didn't want to mix compacted snow in with the backfill. Now this spring, the snow will eventually melt, leave voids in the fill, and it'll settle.
Now, as you can see, luckily before the snowstorm hit, we were able to get our first row of block in. A feature of this wall is going to be this staircase. You can see it's made out of a special type of block. Well, next to the staircase, there's this curved area. We're going to plant a tree here. This will actually end up being about 4 feet high.
The far right side of the wall will be about 3 feet high, and the end of it will curve around into the hillside. So as we add more rows, each one will go further into the hill. A feature of this type of wall is that it leans into the hillside, and that's what gives it a little extra strength. Now you notice that each row sits a little bit behind the row below it. Unfortunately, on a tight curve like this, it means that the blocks are going to get squeezed a little closer together the higher we go. So to make sure that we have enough room for the blocks on the higher rows, we have to get the spacing just right here at the start. It works best if you place the pins 12 inches apart, even if that means leaving a little gap.
Here we go.
Okay.
Down.
Yep. Once we've got a row of blocks in place, we use 2 different materials to fill in behind the blocks. We use river rock to fill in the area around the block. It goes into the core of the block, between the blocks, and for at least 6 inches behind the block.
If there's any other fill to be added here, we'll be using Class 5. Now, ordinarily, you could use the fill on the site, but because it's so moist, it's just about impossible to work with, especially when it's so cold out. In different parts of the country, they have other names for this fill. Technically, it's a free-draining, non-organic fill.
The last step for each row, and one of the most important, is to compact everything down. And we rented this vibrating compactor, and we need to run it back and forth each time we finish a row. just going to stand here to keep this from moving.
Okay, well, that sounds good. Now the blocks for the stairway are square and solid, so there's no holes for the pins. So we'll be attaching these using construction adhesive. Okay, get this down here just a second, Lance. All right, go ahead and put it down, Blaine.
Okay, guys. Oh, watch your fingers.
I might also notice that we made some adjustments in our drainage fabric here to allow for the stairway to rise up above it.
But don't worry. This doesn't mean that here at the steps, water is going to come rushing through this breach in our defenses. Actually, water always follows the path of least resistance.
The water will have more of a tendency to flow through the open webbing of the drainage fabric than through the hard concrete of the stairway. That's pretty good. All right, now we're moving on to the fancy stuff here. This plastic screen is called a geogrid, and it'll serve as a structural support for the wall. We thought we needed it because we have the weight of the hill here pressing down against the wall. Now, the way this works is a geogrid hooks over the tops of the white pins and extends to the back of the excavated area. As we lay up the next course, the grid will be covered with fill, and it'll serve to anchor the wall into the side of the hill. Say, where are those guys anyway?
Remember they had that other job there? 2 days ago, we had snow to deal with. Now what we've got is mud. The worst part of it's right here along the side of the house. Now before the snow, we thought we were just going to replace a little sod when we were done, but now it looks like next spring we're going to have to regrade and do a whole lot of sodding. Actually, the only place we don't have a water problem is right at the wall. The drainage system that we installed is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, so we've been able to keep working.
Well, our right wall's finished up over here. Now you'll notice we put some 4-inch cap blocks on the top here. It's kind of a nice finishing touch. And then we followed these 4-inch blocks into the circular area. It's kind of a nice design possibility to mix the different sizes of block. Now our tree planting area here will actually be 12 inches higher than this wall. We'll be running another course of 4-inch block on the top of this, then tying both of these courses into our higher wall in the back here. It'll just help to define this circular area a little bit.
Now we're ready to start cooking away at the upper wall here. We've shoveled out some of the wet soil and we've put in Class 5 gravel.
Then we leveled and compacted it, so now we can go ahead and finish laying in our base course here. Okay, check that out. Okay, let's get some underneath there. Okay, that's good there.
Well, that looks
It's
good.
Still a
Oh, is
little
it?
high right there. Perfect. Now, everything we needed for the rear wall came up over the top of this area here. So during this time, we decided not to finish off the top of the wall.
Now that the upper wall is almost done, it's safe for us to put in the cap blocks. Well, this isn't going to fit, Dean. I guess I'll have to start taking some off the edges.
Okay, all right, I will get that one.
Well, we've finally gotten to the point on this top row here where the blocks just aren't going to fit because of this curve. So we'll take a little bit off the edges so we can start squeezing them together.
Now normally, you build one of these walls from the bottom up to the top, but we've been working from the right over to the left.
And that was so we could get the bobcat in as close as possible to our work area. Now that we're done with the right and the center sections of the wall, we're over here working on the left side. This strange bit of block here is for a little inset planting bed. It's a real nice feature. You can incorporate it into almost any size project. Now we've split the wall in two here, and we'll add one row of 4-inch block on top of each section. It'll create a little, I don't know, like a little nook in the middle of the wall. It's real nice for planting flowers in.
I guess we're going to have to get some more block up here.
Yeah, and the bobcat can't get in real close, so we'll have to carry most of it by hand.
Yeah, great. We're also going to have to get the mud out of that upper wall up there.
Oh, we can't get up there either, huh?
No, she doesn't want to try, so I'll get some more pins.
Okay.